Hello, my name is Mackenzie Terry, and this video is in regards to my CSD project. My topic being the need for diversity in the interpreting field. Just starting there, I know I've started off with the percentage before, but it's about, I think, 85% predominantly white and female. I don't personally think there's anything wrong with being female, but of course we need more diversity, right, across the board, because with the diversity increasing, we're meeting the needs of the deaf community, because the deaf community in itself is diverse. So with that being said, because of this gap, because you have like predominantly white female, and then you have like these really small percentages of interpreters of color, which is, Black, Asian American, Hispanic, etc. The list goes on. They make up a very, very small amount of the interpreting field, but our interpreting field is large. I believe the last time I looked, and this is just a rough estimate, it was like out of like 10,000 interpreters, there's this massive percentage and then this really small one. And like something I've said from the get-go is that is not a level playing field, right? And the reason being for the need for diversity is the cultural competency. One interpreter could think, there's an assignment that pops up and they could think, oh, I'm qualified for this, and linguistically you might be, or skills wise, whatever you see fit. But when it comes to culturally, you might not. And so say a deaf consumer or hard of hearing consumer or whomever requests a specific interpreter, a Black interpreter, and you as a white person says, I can do this assignment, knowing they request, one, it's not even okay to do that, knowing that they requested a specific interpreter, because there's a reason they did that. But also doing so, and now you aren't linguistically qualified because of the culture aspect. And the reason being is, in a culture, there's cultural, nuances and, facial expressions and things that you could miss, potentially. And then when you miss those things, those cultural nuances, now you're not being able to really relay information accurately. So now the people who are watching your audience, which most likely could be a Black audience or people of color, and now they're missing information because those, what might seem minute details, are relatively drastic to them. And so that's something that's important, because people who are not culturally competent should not be accepting assignments where cultural competency is needed, which is almost on a day-to-day, it's across the board on a day-to-day basis, because of course we are wildly diverse, culturally, racially, sexually, in a variety of ways. The list goes on there. And we're ever changing. Cultural diversity was always there, but the awareness of it is, I really think, what's increasing. I don't think we're just increasingly becoming diverse. I think our awareness of it is changing. We're like, oh, this is where we need to be, and this is where we're not. But I think diversity has always been around, but just the awareness of we need to match that diversity is, I think, coming to everyone's attention. Another issue, which is in Tampa Bay, the Tampa Bay area is home to one of the nation's largest deaf and hard of hearing populations. Yet, accessibility is an issue. And I feel like I've heard across the board, accessibility to an interpreter is an issue. The demand and the supply just doesn't even match. I've watched countless videos from deaf people themselves, talking about going to a doctor's appointment and waiting for an interpreter, can't find an interpreter, or you have an interpreter and they cancel. And then you're back into the waiting game. And even in one of my classes, we've discussed, okay, say they can't find an interpreter. Well, now their doctor's appointment's prolonged, pushed out. And then something else happens, and now it's pushed out. And so the average person, hearing person, can go to the doctor and not have that issue. But then the deaf person, now they're something that could be serious, something could just be a checkup, whatever, doesn't matter. It's being pushed out because the lack of accessibility. We're not meeting the needs of the community. And I personally think the reason being is because of the lack of diversity. If we just, you have all of these people, diverse interpreters that could be in the field, or people pursuing it that could be in the field, and because they're not, well, now we're just left with what else we have, which is the predominantly white female people or interpreters. And you increase that diversity, well, you're now increasing accessibility because now we have more people in the field to meet that demand, let alone just meeting the needs culturally. Now we're meeting the demand of interpreters needed, which is just skyrocketed, I think, in the past decade. But along with the Tampa Bay area is the accessibility. An issue is that the American with Disabilities Act is not being followed. I read one of the articles that, again, back to the doctor appointment, because those are important, like a doctor can refuse to provide an interpreter, which is crazy, because I'm pretty sure that's illegal. But that's not to say that that doesn't happen, because very clearly it's stated it does. And so then that person's left with either A, going to the appointment with little to no communication, probably just jotting notes. We don't know if this person has minimal language. We don't know what their sign language skills are, or if they try to be verbal, whatever it may be, they're missing information, right? And that's a huge issue. So Tampa Bay area, we have this massive deaf and hard of hearing community with just a variety of different like levels of deafness and hard of hearing, latent deaf adults, and so on and so forth. And then we have Americans with Disabilities Act not being followed, which is a problem. And then we have lack of interpreters available. And then lack of diverse interpreters available. So it's just this whole area of issues, because the deaf community is huge across the board, really. The field of interpreting is relatively huge, and it's still not meeting the needs. It's still not where it needs to be. So truly, I mean, we need more allies. We need more awareness. We need more programs to be accessible to people of color who want to go into that field, versus it being geared towards white people. I read in one of my articles that one of the interpreters, her teacher, like, recommended her to go to this Black conference because she was Black, and like everyone else in her class, like, you know, had someone that they could not necessarily resonate with, but they had what looked like themselves in the classroom. And then this person didn't. So the teacher was like, hey, go do this. This is going to help you, like, further your education. Like, go to this conference and where you can meet other people who are trying to do the same thing as you. And, you know, this interpreter thought, like, well, maybe, you know, she was going the extra mile, but, like, ultimately she provided me with something that everyone else in the class already had. I didn't have that. And so by just even providing this little tidbit of information, you're now met with other people where you kind of have, like, a sense of belonging, and, like, you're going forth wanting to do the same thing, which is be in the interpreting field. But now you're in it where culturally it's, like, equivalent across the board, and you're not just left with, well, you can go do this, but accessibility to that person would be limited if they went the alternative route. By having that extra information provided, their accessibility was increased. And we should see that more, because it's basically just like a systemic cycle, and that just needs to be broken. There needs to be more accessibility for people who want to be in the field to get into the field, and then you know, hone in on their skills, hold in on their cultural competency, and then go out into the community where the needs need to be met.